I'm Carmen Sandim, pianist and composer, and my album Mini Brazilian Beasts is coming out on Octave Records. The album title, Mini Brazilian Beasts, is one of the tracks, and that's a song that I wrote for my kids. I'm from Brazil, and when I drive, my kids always tell me, "Drive like a Brazilian beast, Mama." And they are actually much faster in life than I am. They're just running around all the time, so they're the mini Brazilian beasts, since I am the Brazilian beast when I drive. This album is entirely, I have to be so grateful to Octave Records because it's entirely it happened because of Octave Records. I had no intention of writing any music during the pandemic. I was just busy taking care of my kids, and they were home from school and just survival mode, right? And but then talking to Jessica, the executive producer, and she offered me this deal, and she put in the schedule, "You must record this date." And I was like, well, I must write music because I don't have anything new that I want to record. So all of the music that is in this album is music that was written in the 6 months before the actual recording. Booked the studio for 3 days, realizing that the first day we probably wouldn't be able to get any good takes of anything. So we just had the first day to learn the songs together. And I had incredible musicians playing with me, and that's partially why we didn't have time to practice together before the recording. Gilad Hexelman came from New York to do it. Greg Garrison, that's usually super busy with the Leftover Salmon, was available because of the pandemic, but we weren't really able to kind of be hanging out because of the pandemic as well. So it was a very different experience. In my previous albums, I always recorded with a band that I had at least played a dozen gigs with. So this is unique in that sense. These world-class musicians are always busy and going out in the world and doing their tours. So for them to even be available to do something in Colorado, and so that was definitely would not have happened without the pandemic. And honestly, the music that I wrote because of the pandemic and during the pandemic. So I think this album is definitely a pandemic baby. Colin Bricker is such a genius, and I've done all of my albums with him, so he knows exactly what I like. And so by the time that I got there, it was already mic'd, and it was ready the way I like it. The piano where we recorded this album was a great piano. I loved that piano. So it was really nice to have an instrument that really responds well to my intentions. My intentions, they can come through very easily on that piano. So that wasn't a big deal at all. It was just a nice surprise because, we never know what we're going to get when we go somewhere to play. That was my first time recording in DSD. And I'm really impressed with the results. Just the sound of the album is so warm, and it just sounds like the band is right there. This is my third album, but by far my favorite one in terms of sound. So I'm really glad that I had this opportunity. Ron Miles has been one of the biggest influences in my music, and definitely kind of like the fairy godfather of my career. So every good thing that happened in my career since I moved to Colorado in 2004 has to do with Ron Miles, and we worked together at Metro. He hired me to teach jazz history there, and he taught me how to do that. And he was just an angel for the jazz community, and to me personally, he was so. It was super. I'm so honored that he was in that track, and that turned out to be the last recording he ever did. And so the name of the track is Glenn because it's his middle name, so it's for him. And we'll miss him so much. It's hard talking about it even because it still feels so fresh. But I'm really honored and beyond happy that I had that opportunity to do that song with him. One of the songs is called That's Just the Way It Is, Okay? And that's, I was trying to write something and my kids are running around and fighting with each other. And I'm like, oh, this is not conducive for artistry. And then I hear my boy telling my daughter, well, it's my turn to have the iPad. And my daughter says, no, it's my turn. You just played it. You just used the iPad. And he's like, no, but I'm older, and that's just the way it is. Older kids get to use the iPad more often. No, that's just the way it is. You just have to accept it. And like the way that he said just the way it is had this little melody in it. And then I took that melody and I started that song. So that's one example of moments that kind of spark some sort of inspiration. Another one, the day I took my Moderna vaccine, and I was full of hope, and I came back home and I just wrote the song that I called Magia Moderna, like the magic of the Moderna, the modern medicine or magic. So that had that sensation for me of the hopeful, moving forward, we're gonna be out of this pandemic at some point. A title that was inspired by a real life moment. So right at the beginning of the lockdown, I actually sold a house, my home, and my best friend at the time showed up with a truck to help me move the day I had to be out of there because I couldn't find movers because of the pandemic. It was super difficult, and we spent pretty much like 16 hours straight moving. And as soon as I got to my new apartment, we sat down in this little veranda area and we're looking at the mountains that had great view of that apartment. And we were talking about what could make Colorado more perfect. And what I said was like, well, if over that hill there was an ocean, that would make Colorado more perfect. And this friend of mine turned to me and said, well, there is an ocean there eventually. And I was like, yeah, there's an eventual ocean over there. And it turned out, and because I'm Pisces, I guess, I make everything that people say ends up being like the meaning of life for me. So I kept thinking of that, oh yes, eventual ocean, and it meaning eventually figuring yourself out, figuring life out, and figuring love out. And so I wrote this song for this friend of mine, and eventually I married a friend of mine about a year later, after the recording actually. So he became the eventual ocean, and I wrote that song, inspired by that moment. The track Cassandra Speaks, inspired by the story of Cassandra, who sees the future, and then she tells her community the future, that there's this big horrible thing coming, but nobody believes her. So she keeps speaking, and I kind of drew this connection with artists and almost like the what we're going through in society now with equality rights and women being believed and and all of that. And so that story, when I read more about that story, inspired that song. And just this idea that we must continue speaking even if we're not heard, and artists and women and underprivileged populations and all of that. So that song is inspired by that story and just how it connects with what we're going through socially right now in the world. Drumelandia is, my son is called Julian and my daughter is called Amelie. So Julian and Amelie, their land of craziness is Drumelandia. So that song sounds like the kind of craziness that they come up with every day. And a lot of it is a very rhythmic song, so a lot of it just sounds like them running around the house and breaking stuff and singing and laughing and fighting with each other and being lovely and horrible at the same time. So that's Drumelandia. Nervosa is a song that was inspired by a nervous breakdown. And it's not that I had a nervous breakdown, it's more like I wanted to have a nervous breakdown. And I thought, well, this is like what it would sound like if I allowed myself to really put out there what I feel. So I didn't scream that day, but I wrote that song instead.